Philippa, if I could start by asking you about the genesis of the project. Wonderful novel. How did you approach bringing it to the screen in this marvellous form?
Well, it was quite hard, as you can imagine, because it's a very long, fantastic novel, and it's very... The way the novel is set out, which if anyone's read it, they'll know that it follows Arthur Conan Doyle's life and George Adelgie's life from birth to death, pretty much. So it was a very difficult adaptation. So once I got Ed on board to write it, we really had a big kind of head scratch about how the hell we do it. And we went through a couple of incarnations with it. And there was one version, actually, that was a very literal version of George and Arthur like the book, but it just wasn't very televisual, so we had to throw that out and start again and decide to just hone in on that, a very small portion of the book, really, which is the Adelgie case, of the actual letters and the conviction, and 3 parts. We were given 3 hours to do it, and really you probably need about 15 hours to do a proper adaptation, but ITV gave us 3 hours. And we tried to then weave in as much as we could around those 3 hours of Jean Leckie and Arthur's past, and there's some things that come out, but obviously we couldn't do the whole book. But that was the big challenge, really.
And Ed, condensing this novel into 3 hours, and that is an extraordinary challenge, isn't it? How did you achieve it?
Yeah, well, I think some irritating wise person once said, if you chase 2 rabbits, you catch neither. And there's a bit of that with adaptation, which is the worst thing you can do is bite off more than you can chew, because you just shortchange everything. And through the process of trying to be faithful to it and realizing that if we were faithful to that 500-page book, it would be 15 hours long. As Philippa said, we sort of, I wouldn't say it's the heart of the book, because the book is expansive and brilliant, has many hearts, but I think the heart that we felt we could build a drama around was the story of Arthur coming to terms with his guilt, and somehow through that, and through his friendship with Woody, and through the fact he can't be with Jean, that propels him into the case. So he's almost looking for a challenge, and then he finds one. And so that, the sophistication of that, I suppose, in the sense that you hit something here and it pops up there. Yeah. Was just really exciting. And once we had that idea, it was like everything flowed from that.
Great. And Martin, when you approached it, what appealed about this character, this marvellous man that you were bringing to life?
Gosh, I don't know. Because it was quite scary.
Were you nervous approaching it then?
I was really just because I knew Philippa was working on it, but I honestly didn't know that I was intended to play it.
When did that discussion happen then?
Well, she just said, well, if you want...
It was quite late on, actually.
It was quite late on, yeah. I shouldn't assume that everything she does, needs to involve me. But I knew she was battling away with Julian's agent, and then sort of finding Ed, and then, discussing with Ed, and how to do it, and then there was me, so I couldn't really say no because she's my wife. It would have been really annoying and awkward if I had, and also as Caroline Quentin once said to me, it's good to scare the shit out of yourself every now and again, and it certainly did that, and it's always different playing people who are real and not made up. It's quite, both are challenging and both are rewarding in different ways, but there's sort of penalties to both, and there's one, people, this is a man that people care immensely about and people know an enormous amount about, and for a character in history there's a YouTube clip of him talking.
Wow.
Rubbish, but he much later in life with a terrier, and so that was a sort of real sort of call to arms. And then there was the realization that he was Scottish, which was news to a lot of people, and so that had to be dealt with. And so that's how I approached it. Terrified. Yes.
Well, it worked very well.
Yes.
Arsher, intriguing character. We're not quite sure yet where we are with him. How did you approach him?
Well, in the book, the book is so meticulous and so rich. Like Philippa said, you really get a sense of these two people from childhood up until when they meet, and obviously the medium, television has to sort of get in there, when they meet, sort of, to propel it. But George, he's a very sort of literal-minded chap. He's quite logical. In my head, he was sort of, I played him as an alien in a way. He's sort of Spockish.
Yeah.
There's something, you know, he's not very sort of, he's not good in social situations. He sort of lives in that, on that autistic spectrum, you know. So the challenge was to keep him on that kind of, you know, path. You know, because as an actor, you just, you know, you immediately want to be liked. And I don't care what anybody says, but you immediately sort of, you know, your natural instinct is to make him, you know, a character more charming than, you know, necessarily has to be. But I had to keep him on that kind of straight and narrow because it really pays off by the end.
Yeah, and in the book, actually, it's a shame because there's so many fantastic bits in the book about George, and when he writes a whole, which is absolutely true, writes the history of railway law, I think.
Yeah, George is the kind of person who gets excited by railway time.
Yeah, yeah, I think definitely autistic,
Yeah.
and there's some funny, really funny bits in the
I
book.
think Railway Law hit the cutting room floor about
We
draft,
really
draft
wanted to
7,
keep
I think.
it in,
yeah.
we said it's got to go, but we loved it, and there was a lot of text. I mean, obviously, a lot of texture in the book that we couldn't put in, but yeah, like Arsher said, we had to hone in on that.
But Arsher and I had the greatest set of research notes written by Julian Barnes, because a large part of the book is these two biographies in tandem.
Yeah.
And it's all there, and you just couldn't ask for better written
Yeah.
research notes, you know,
Fantastic,
because it's
yeah.
a wonderful novelist's slant on two people's lives, and it was all there, and that sort of, there's loads of bits that aren't in the programme, but I think there's so much of it is informed by that history and that sort of that backstory that we're, you know, ever indebted to Mr. Barnes.
That's great. Hattie, a lovely character, Jean. How would you characterise her relationship with Sir Arthur?
I guess it's very richly drawn. I think what Ed has created and condensed down. Again, the book is so rich with regards to that relationship. It just really appealed. It's just they've had a very unusual history. I think they had to sustain a so-called platonic relationship for 9 years. I think they met and virtually fell in love instantly, the evidence seems to show. And his wife remained alive for a very long time. And so they conducted this, by our standards, extraordinarily principled and no doubt very constrained relationship on very sort of particular, with a particular very set of rules. But within that framework, they seem to have been a real meeting of minds. A bit of an age difference, but she seems to have been able to not necessarily match him intellectually, but have the confidence to have her own mind and to disagree with him and contradict him, and they just seem to have adored each other, really. And but it's full of light and shade and colour, and yeah, she was a lovely one to play.
Great. Martin, I'm intrigued by the fact that it was a sort of, when Arthur met Jean, you know, platonic relationship for so long. Why does he feel so guilty about it?
Well, because I don't think because of the nature of their friendship stroke love, it was always, you know, his first wife was alive. And
So
and
it was
ambiguous.
actually,
I think it was quite clear, actually, because, as you said, because of the formality of the period and everything, and what could and couldn't be done. And also that Arthur's whole family were aware. And there was nothing
he talked to his
clandestine
mother
about
about it.
it. Talked to his mother about it, his wife
She became
knew
a sort
about
of
it.
guest at the house.
She
I mean,
was,
always
yeah.
chaperoned by her brother, but
Yeah.
it was a very, I mean, they declared their love to one another, and the book has some lovely passages of, you know, moments where they might kiss or not, or, you know, but it's a constantly contested thing and constantly battled, and their hearts are constantly, you know, being tested. So it was a very difficult, it wasn't a calm 9 years of that's in a platonic box and here's my marriage. It's a sort of how to sustain that. How does she keep her faith that at the end of all this they will get together, or, you know, it's
extraordinary,
Yeah.
actually.
It is
It's over
extraordinary.
10 years of a woman's life to keep. But he was another thing that I think we forget in this day and age is how famous Conan Doyle was.
Yeah.
I mean, a massive celebrity. So I suppose that there was a lot going on with him, with his charm and power and status, and And they really genuinely fell in love. And I think when they met, Louisa, his wife, was only supposed to be, she was given a year to live when she had her consumption, and she lived for 10 years. So I think he was waiting for her to die. But he did love her, but didn't love her like he loved Jean. And then the guilt of everything just threw him.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and actually, because Ed, and Philippa concentrated on the TV drama and the George and the case and the solving of that, we're given tiny little brushstrokes of Arthur and Jean, and Hattie did such a fantastic job of investing these little spots with so much, and informed by the book and Molly Barr and her talent and Stuart's artistry and everything it was quite a balancing act to keep that story alive to the end.
Well, she's fantastic, and her own woman from her very first thing when she says, "I haven't read your books."
Exactly.
That's brilliant, isn't it?
I love that.
Yeah, that's a fantastic line.
Yeah, she's setting her stall out right there, isn't she? Yeah. Everybody would have read his book. Yes.
Stuart, to ask you, Martin said everyone feels very passionately about Conan Doyle still. Why are we still so fascinated by him, do you think?
I don't really know. Except that the stories, yes, they just seem to keep the imagination of the audience going. I mean, this is what's really interesting about this story, that you were finding out about the man behind the icon, and I think that whole business of guilt, which Ed was talking about, the idea of a man who had strong morals and who couldn't deal with the fact that he had this love for this woman and his wife was still alive. The difficulty of that, the scene where his mother, who knew about Jean, the family guest, and talked to him on that walk across the lawn. That was so. Conan. It's not about Sherlock Holmes. Clearly, it's about Conan Doyle and the ever-ending fascination of Sherlock Holmes going on and on. But
that is very interesting. I mean, would you still say that there are similarities that are drawn in the film between Conan Doyle and his most famous creation? I mean, even subliminally.
Well, the
he wishes.
He wishes.
I think that, it's a hybrid. I think. Yeah, sorry, that's just.
No, that was interesting because even from the beginning, where he throws the book down on the portrait that's been sent to him by
it's Shakespeare who throws on it, is it?
Yes. Yeah. But the idea that actually Sherlock Holmes is driving him a little crazy, and yet he's enforced to keep writing about him, and clearly went on and wrote other very good books. But that thing about him, wanting to get into the Adalji case out of the guilt that he felt. Yes. That was the really pushing theme of it.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that unites everything, because one of the challenges of it is it's many things. It's a love story, it's a mystery, it's a sort of buddy movie in a sense with Arthur and Woody, and then there's the whole fact that it's about Arthur Conan Doyle. So there's a lot to sort of unify, and I think Stuart and Martin in particular sort of really managed to sort of knit those things together. In a way that sort of on the page intellectually was there, but in the end that's not enough. It's got to sort of live as one thing with all those elements sort of flowing together. I think the thing that I was sort of really glad about was that you have this period at the beginning where we were going, is it too bleak for too long? Is he too depressed for too long? Is he too guilty for too long? But I think keeping our nerve and sort of playing that first act pretty downbeat really. Is that when it tips into the adventure, you get it. You understand that this is sort of almost unconsciously self-administered therapy. This is how he's going to get out of this. He's not going to get out of it with Jean. He didn't know how he thought that when his wife died, he would just be with Jean. He's waited so long, and then it's like you don't know how you're going to feel, and that he's surprised to discover that Jean is actually the last person he wants to see, and that's kind of that fantastically played scene between the two of them on the sofa. You get it, and he's paralysed, and the case breaks the paralysis.
And when he does come to life, you feel like you've earned it. And also the nods to Sherlock identifying George's limp and the causes of so forth, just the odd nods to Sherlock. Were you conscious of Sherlock as a sort of presence almost in the background, Martin, or even in the foreground? Or were you just playing Conan Doyle?
I think he's in Conan Doyle's thinking, but
Yeah.
Conan Doyle had a really mixed relationship because he'd killed him at this point.
Yes.
He'd thrown him off the waterfall and was over.
Years of therapy ahead.
Over him, yeah, and yes, but it's sort of like art therapy, it's sort of detective therapy. I think he sort of went through it, and they all needed George to come along. All the characters in the story needed George to come along and sort of burst the boil.
Do you think there were similarities between the real Conan Doyle and Sherlock?
No, because I think Sherlock Holmes is perfect, and that's why we
Right,
love him.
yes.
And he can do no wrong, and every word is the right one, because it was chosen by a brilliant writer. And nobody's writing Conan Doyle apart from Julian Barnes is writing him, but observing him in the book. But he ain't no fiction, so he's got flaws and fractures and things that confound him. And also, as Philippa said, I don't even know if there was the ghastly word celebrity, but he was really famous at a time when you either had to be royalty or have a big house to be famous, and that was it, really. And he sort of carved his own space, I think, as a famous novelist when photography was invented. All these things were invented at this time.
It was a shame
Cars,
we couldn't
we have
get,
cars and horses.
Supernatural element as well. Because he
And
was
then
big
there was
on-
all that, yes, he was
Yeah.
barking mad as well.
And he was famous enough to want to be disguised when he went to Staffordshire as well, wasn't he?
Yes, he was consumed with that, but also he was trying to do everything with his fame, as a lot of other famous people do, try and get the most out of it, and try and get they want to be secret, but they want the advantages, they want the access, but they want the privacy.
Yes.
I think, and that turned around and bit him, and it does in our story.
I think he had a really big ego as well.
Yes,
because
massive.
he was incredibly famous, and I think as it unfolds, as the series unfolds, it really shocks him that he can't. If he says he wants to do something, he'll do it, and everyone will listen to him. And the fact that it doesn't quite work out like that shocked him. It was, it's a big surprise that it didn't revolve around him.
Yes, and the shitty police who'd colluded in and we definitely think this was a frame. We there's no two ways about it. This isn't up for he was framed, and these people did close ranks on him, but they also closed ranks again. As you see Conleth saying, "You must be Sherlock Holmes." It's like that.
Yes.
It's like up yours, writer.
Does it help Philippa in terms of getting commissions and so forth, that Sherlock is such a massive entity now?
Well, Sherlock wasn't actually.
Oh, really?
When I started working
7
on this.
years ago.
However many years ago it was.
Yeah.
I think possibly the Guy Ritchie film had been out, but it wasn't. There absolutely was not
Right.
the revival that there is now. So that was unfolding as we were developing this, which was a weird parallel.
Yeah.
Suddenly, Sherlock's everywhere, and it was a kind of kismet that we got this
Why
going.
do you think
at the same
Sherlock
time.
has caught fire in this way at the moment?
It's never gone out that
I mean,
far.
it
The
always
fire's
has.
never gone out.
Never.
No.
No,
But it does go out of fashion sometimes.
Yes.
But I think it's
Not for
come.
long.
He's the most ever adapted character.
Yeah, he's up there with James Bond and Winnie the Pooh. We're just
Yeah.
really good at creating these global brands.
He's not as big as Winnie. Come on, steady on it.
Yeah, so it wasn't like, oh well, that's the Sherlock thing's happening, let's tap into that. Absolutely wasn't. I just loved the book, and
That's great.
yeah.
The other relationship that's key is with Woody. I mean, it's absolutely lovely. That can you talk a bit about it and with Charles Edwards as well?
Yes, it's a shame
who's
Charles
so
couldn't be.
gorgeous,
Charles
yeah.
is in what's that play he's doing?
Blythe Spirit.
Blythe Spirit in America, with Angela Lansbury, and having a ball. But really sad that he couldn't be here for all the time. And he's just an absolute joy. And that relationship sort of obviously has Watson and Holmes sort of parallels.
Yes.
Except that Watson didn't work for Holmes. He wasn't on the payroll.
Yes, that's true.
Which really was. So it's sort of, I don't know. And I think there's something aspirational about Conan Doyle as a self-made Scot, but with we know that Woody was an accomplished soldier, not quite as good a cricketer, but there were. I like to think, and it helped me in the playing of our relationship to have some kind of like, I'll listen to you because you're posh, but then you work for me. So I'll up to a point,
It's like Arthur with John Gielgud in those films, isn't it? A bit. Arthur, the Dudley Moore film.
Dudley
I'm
Moore
talking
film.
Oh,
about,
sorry.
yeah. He has a very, very
Tony
important part of that.
Arthur's,
Yes, another Arthur.
yes.
That was the other interesting thing about the difference between the relationship between the women and Arthur, and then Arthur and Woody, and then Arthur and George. These three stories were running in parallel. And one of the tricky things, I suppose, was to get the balance between the adventure. You know, they were off on an adventure, but that adventure wasn't quite Sherlock Holmes, and yet the relationship between you and Woody, and that was a core to it as well. So these parallel lines were moving through and continue to do so into the third episode.
Yeah.
I mean, Philippa, it's such a lovely relationship. Have you thought of, developing it in further series?
Never crossed my mind, is it?
I should be a commissioning editor, shouldn't I?
Well, if people like it, it's it's there. There were.
I mean,
he did
our
go
goal
on.
was to do the book, and
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
Anything else would be jam. But he did go on, and he did. He did investigate other injustices, and then there's the whole the psychic stuff, which
That's
is
really fascinating. Actually,
weird.
we just couldn't go into that. It
No.
was too much, but really interesting.
no
Did that play a big part in his life then?
massive,
Massive.
in his later life. Yeah.
But that'd be intriguing to go into that, wouldn't
Extraordinary.
it?
When Agatha Christie went missing, he was called upon
Really?
to investigate her disappearance.
That's another movie right there, isn't
He
it?
was lobbying for every police force to have a psychic on the team.
Wow.
What else?
Well, when he died, and there's a lovely passage at the end of the book, actually, which we obviously just couldn't get in because Doyle had died, but that he left in his will that he wanted to take over the whole of the Albert Hall, and he had his sons up there, Jean was up there, they were all sitting in chairs, and there was a chair for Doyle, and Doyle said, "I will come back and prove to you," in front of the whole place was packed, and of course nothing happened. So they sat there for hours, and with Julian Barnes makes this lovely little comment in the book, which obviously you wouldn't know if it happened or not, that there was just this little smile from Jean Leckie, obviously not quite buying into the whole thing. But people paid and they went along, and they all sat there. He didn't have a funeral. He just believed that he was going to be coming back.
And didn't he get involved in a court case with the controversy over those photographs of fairies?
That was
His father was a fairy photographer.
and he did. Yes, he did. He did.
Yeah, when people were trying to disprove
Yes, he
them.
did.
Because
he did.
he said,
yes.
no, this is real. This is absolutely real.
Yes.
So there was this really strange side of Conan Doyle that.
And he was buried standing up.
Wow.
And one of the things I love about the story is that he and Jean did marry, and they lived together happily ever after. They had 3 children, and he was buried standing up. And when she died, she was buried standing next to him.
Oh, how lovely.
Until the 50s, when the house was sold, and they were both dug up, standing up, and moved
Bizarre, isn't it? You really couldn't write it.
little
It's
churchyard
so
in Kent.
We left that out, yeah.
Yeah.
You've got about 5 more series
DVD
just
extras.
here. This is extraordinary
Yeah,
stuff.
it is.
It's great.
It is, yes, it is, and because he's so fascinating and multifaceted, and it's the bloke behind Sherlock Holmes as well. This ever.
It is extraordinary.
It's such
present.
rich material,
Yeah,
isn't
it
it?
really is.
It's incredible. I understand that you got behind the wheel. No, that's not the right word. With a horse and cart, you actually drove one at one point.
I don't think the producer knows.
Oh,
that.
sorry.
I wasn't supposed to. I did
Philippa,
drive.
if you could just block your ears at this moment.
I did drive one of the big wagons up in the Black Country.
Was that
it's-
exciting?
Yeah, it was lovely. I like that sort of thing. But yeah, no. Steve Dent, who provided, as I drive horses and ride and whatever, we have horses, and I watch telly, and I know when that's the same bloody horse that dragged the thing across. But Steve Dent, who had the horses, we never lacked for a variety of horses. And when Jean's carriage came, you only saw them, but they had these beautiful high-stepping carriage horses. We had smart horses. We had all the right harness at every single turn and point, and every variety of horse, which obviously pleased us.
Stuart, there are a lot of complex scenes. It's period. What was the
Right.
biggest challenge for you?
Well, I suppose finding the locations that told the story in the best way, because we needed a great whirly that wasn't achievable within the M25. So
Where did you find that then?
That's in a sort of living museum in the Black Country.
Wow.
So we used 2 museums up there, and then We went to Oxford for the vicarage. So we toiled the country.
But I really noticed it here on this lovely big screen that when George and his father go into the garden and see all that stuff,
Yes.
the other side of that wall,
It's
it's nothing.
open, yeah.
It's absolutely nothing, which are, just places it in, how many walls have nothing, the other side of it. It's lovely to see.
And he was very specific in terms of the Julian Barnes story, where the street was in relation to the woods and how the people got into the back of the blacksmiths. Come in the second episode, all those things. But
and Julian's really interesting because when he was researching the book, he went up to Great Worley, and people shut doors in his face. You'll be hear about the rippings. Poof. They don't.
Still?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Gosh,
Yeah.
that's intriguing.
Yeah.
Was he very involved, Philippa, in the production, Julian Barnes?
No, actually, I did ask if he wanted to be, but he didn't, which is absolutely fine. And we obviously did show him the scripts with a little bit of trepidation. But he liked it and was very generous and very kind about it, and did understand that to make an adaptation of a book, or any book, but particularly that book, we had to make some changes and make it sort of televisual. So yeah, we've got to know him a little bit through this, and he's been absolutely charming.
Yeah, he's been
That's
really
right.
great
Yeah.
and sort of quite
Yeah.
tickled about his. We think that his book's got another visit, and he came out the day my Jack Russell was on set, actually, which is lucky for him.
Do you like Arthur? I mean, we mentioned the fact that he's got a big ego, but he's got many likeable qualities, hasn't he?
I like him enormously, actually, and in the YouTube clip, he has a very kindly face, lots of smile lines and stuff, and he's obviously a very generous personality. I don't think he was mean-spirited at all. He was an incredible enthusiast, an incredible intellect, and seemed to throw himself into any number of subjects, but wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
Never, not a toad of Toad Hall just dipping into things like that. He would go,
Yeah.
the whole hog, took himself to war.
He decided he wanted to go whaling, so he went off whaling for a year or two.
He went to war as well.
He went to
Yeah,
war.
went to
war,
Yeah.
Goodness me.
As a photographer or a journalist. Yeah.
And a pioneer in the work that he did that brought about the Court of Appeal. I mean, it's extraordinary, the different things that he did.
This case brought about the Court of Appeal, yes. And an ophthalmologist.
Yes. I mean, even saying that, it sounds
Yes,
complicated.
thank you.
Yeah.